I think it's safe for me to tell you that the Christian church in America is shrinking quickly. And I think the same is going on in Europe. But why? Why are people not going to church? Why are young people not going to church, especially millennials? I'm going to talk about that today. Hi, I'm David Thompson. This has been a question on my mind for a long time. Now, I've personally took time over the last year to ask a lot of questions of a lot of young people. I have 2 children of my own. They're older, out of college, have their own careers, but we talked about why they don't go to church. And I've talked to their friends and, of course, a lot of other people that I've got to know over the years. I think I've formed a pretty good idea, but I'm going to do a little different tactic today. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to give you some statistics, and then I'm going to let a special guest tell you its opinion. Hold on for that. First of all, statistically, Christianity is the largest religion in the U.S. Now, of course, there is a caveat to that, friends. Christians make up 65% of the U.S. population. Now, that's down more than 11% over the last decade, and it's speeding up as it goes forward. Keep that in mind. Pew Research Center said that the percentage of Americans that believe in God, pray daily, and attend church regularly is declining. A national poll shows young adults are not practicing religion and are not identifying with a particular denomination. Millennials who stopped going to church said this, and I believe 73% who participated in this poll said this. They said the reason they don't go to church is either church or pastor-related reasons. So what do the pastors have to say about this? I didn't ask anybody directly here. I admit that. But I went online and there were more than enough evangelical pastors especially that were going to talk and give their reason why young people aren't going to church. These are pastors that are well known. You may even know some of the names I would mention, but I'm not mentioning their names. And of course, some are smaller churches that have websites or blogs. And I found this out. They said this. The reason young people aren't going to church is because they have a deep attraction for the world they live in, and they want to live it up. Bad attitudes. These children don't have good attitudes and don't want to believe in God. In some cases, they say churches are providing entertainment and pizza to their youth instead of teaching them in the ways of their faith. Liberal professors teach them that God is not real. Added to this, universities are challenging them in their worldview, and they don't have their tools to debate their professors. So let me address this right now. First of all, I don't believe most of this is true. I think this is excuses used by people to blame someone else for their own failings. Over the years, children went to church. A lot of it was because their family made them go to church. But this isn't where we're at here in America. We shouldn't make anybody do anything. That shouldn't happen when it comes to church especially. You should go willingly, right? That's the idea here. Why aren't they going willingly? What's happened in the last 15 or 20 years that's made children, young people, move away from the church? I have some answers to that. Hold on, I'll give them to you. But let me first hit this. Universities are coming against these young people and destroying their faith. How about the God is Not Dead movie? It's a great movie, an uplifting movie, but it's not real. It's not factual. That doesn't happen. Not very often. Now, Ben Trueblood of the Issues of Faith podcast said this. We really didn't see anything statistically significant about these young adults going off to college and their professor convincing them that their faith isn't real. They did not find a statistically significant level of that in their research. So let's go back to the God is Not Dead movie. Again, a great movie, uplifting movie, but it isn't real. That really doesn't happen very often. So why are we blaming professors and colleges and the kids themselves for wanting to go out and live a life of sin and all these things? It really goes back to the church itself and to the families. We're going to talk more about that, but hold on here. We're not done. How about how we teach children? Bill Nye, the science guy, you ever heard of him? Yeah, that's him there. Now, he preaches his own gospel of evolution. That's a big deal to right-wing Christians. It's not a big deal to me because really I don't put any thought into it anymore. It doesn't matter. But to Christians, it does. It's part of the checklist. If you don't believe this, you're not a real Bible-believing Christian. This is another way young people get turned off. You're the ones that put them in harm's way when you force them to say you have to believe this. Don't worry about it. There's only one thing they really need to believe, and that's Jesus Christ, right? That's where it should be. Everything else falls into place later. But when you start putting these restrictions on people, checklists on people, forcing them to believe something much of the world doesn't, you've put them in harm's way. Don't let them go in worried about it either way. Let them know their faith is based on Jesus, not on Bill Nye and evolution and Darwin, and definitely not on liberal professors teaching them something contrary to what you've taught them. If you've taught them right, they'll always come back. That's what you have to believe. So let's look at Jeff Goldblum. This is my point. Now, Jeff Goldblum plays a character in Jurassic Park, one of my favorite movies. He plays Dr. Ian Malcolm. But he says this famously, because they were building dinosaurs. They were breeding dinosaurs that were dead for supposedly millions of years. Okay, and we're bringing them into a world with humans where they don't belong. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop and think if they should. See, it's the same with us. So let's put this in perspective on how we teach our children. It's fine if you want to teach them creation, but you also have to make them aware that there's evolution, that many people in this world believe in it, that it's not the biggest deal in the world. Don't go to college thinking that you're going to have to believe in evolution or believe in creationism or one or the other. Go into college with the heart of Jesus. That's your job to do as a Christian, to be the hands and feet of Jesus wherever you go. Don't worry about evolution or creationism. Once you make it a big deal, then they have to fight it. And once your professors, and once the science they use debunks it, whether you believe that or not, once it's debunked in the mind of your child, it's over. Everything else topples because you've put so much emphasis on things that don't matter. It doesn't. But we make it matter because, you see, that's the checklist. We have to check off. And if you don't hit every checklist, if your kid doesn't check off everything on that list, all of a sudden they're not where they need to be. You've alienated them. And so has the church. So all these things that these pastors say are excuses. It's up to the individual child and the parent to learn the ways of Christianity. And it's up to that child, your child, to use what he or she has learned in his future endeavors in the world. And he has to do that on the basis of rational belief, understanding that there are going to be disagreements, understanding that not all of it is that important. The important things are the things that Jesus taught. That's what's important. Everybody's gone off the reservation and started pointing fingers. Problem is, my mother told me, you point a finger, 3 point back at you. So what I did here, having said all that, I went to Chat GDP. Right. A lot of people hate it. Christians hate them. Demons, you name it. Okay, believe what you believe. I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to argue. See, again, I'm not going to worry about it. But I asked the question to see what Chat GDP, through research throughout the internet and throughout what's been written, commentaries made, to see what Chat GDP believes on some of these questions that I've had. I asked Chat GDP, first of all, why are millennials disconnected from church? Here was Chat GDP's answer. Millennials are walking away from the church in large numbers, and it's not because they've lost faith, but because they've lost trust. The truth is that many millennials have accused evangelical Christian churches of being intolerant and judgmental. Some conservative religious groups openly condemn homosexuality and transgender identity as immoral or unnatural, citing scripture or spiritual beliefs as justification. This often manifests in exclusion from faith communities, attempts to correct gender identity or sexual orientation, and resistance to policies that promote equality and protection under the law. Raised in a time of rapid social change, millennials have grown up seeing the world through a lens of diversity, inclusion, and open dialogue. But when they turned to the church for community or spiritual grounding, many found an institution that seemed out of touch, more focused on judgment than compassion, and more interested in control than connection. This disconnect has created a generational rift. Many millennials still believe in God, still seek purpose, and still long for community, but they are no longer willing to find it in spaces they feel rigid, intolerant, and politically motivated. I think that's true across the board. The Christian church has taken up the viewpoints of the Sadducees and Pharisees of Jesus' time, pointing their finger at everybody. Jesus was a radical, and he changed how people looked at everything forever. And he allowed everybody to come to him. He wanted everybody to come to him. And millennials see that today. Next, I asked Chat GDP about the rise of politics in Christianity. It said this: in recent decades, the white evangelical Christian church in the United States has undergone a profound transformation, shifting from a spiritual movement to a deeply political force. What began as a moral and cultural advocacy effort in the late 20th century has evolved into a near complete alignment with the Republican Party. For many millennials, the modern church, particularly white evangelical Christianity, has become synonymous not with faith, grace, or community, but with partisanship, judgment, and political power. As the white evangelical church became increasingly aligned with the Republican Party over the past decades, its public witness shifted. Instead of being seen as a space for spiritual growth and moral reflection, the church began to look to many millennials like a political machine. Sermons started to echo campaign talking points. Christian identity became conflated with conservative nationalism. And expressions of faith were often used to defend policies and leaders that seemed at best ethically inconsistent with the teachings of Jesus. The result has been a steady exodus, not necessarily from faith, but from the institutional religion. Many millennials still believe in God, still pray, and still seek meaning, but they're choosing to do it outside of the walls of a church they no longer trust to reflect the radical compassion and justice that originally drew them to faith. To reconnect the younger generations, the church may need to disentangle its identity from partisan politics and rediscover its calling as a force for humility, healing, and hope. Now, this statement seems pretty accurate to me. I have seen this firsthand. I have talked to a lot of people, know a lot of people that are involved in right-wing politics, right-wing Christianity, and it's definitely been overtaken by the Republican Party, by conservative politics. Should I say conservative politics really took over the Republican Party. So I wanted Chat GDP to compare Jesus with what people today believe as righteous judgment. This is what Chat GDP had to say. The ministry of Jesus, as described in the Gospels, was radical in its compassion, humility, and inclusivity. He consistently reached out to those marginalized by society: lepers, tax collectors, the poor, women, and Samaritans. He challenged religious leaders, broke social norms, and centered his message on love, grace, and forgiveness. His mission wasn't to build political power or enforce moral purity through the law, but to heal, uplift, and offer hope to the rejected and forgotten. In stark contrast, parts of today's church, particularly in the Western evangelical context, have become known not for grace, but for judgment. Instead of being a refuge for the outcast, many churches have become gatekeepers of morality, quick to condemn those who don't fit their cultural or doctrinal mold. The judgment posture runs counter to the example Jesus set. While he never compromised truth, he always delivered through love. He didn't demand people change before approaching him. He met them where they were and invited transformation through relationship, not condemnation. The widening gap between the compassion of Christ and the conduct of some churches have driven many, especially younger generations, away from institutional religion. They're not rejecting Jesus. They're rejecting the distortion of his message. For the church to reclaim its moral and spiritual credibility, it must return to the heart of Jesus, a heart that defends the vulnerable, embraces the outsider, and sees every person not as an issue to be fixed, but as a soul to be loved. So the excuses the modern church has given to explain the exodus of young people from the pews goes far beyond rebellion. It cuts to the heart of the modern Western church's goal to control people through fear rather than a true relationship with Jesus. Okay, I can't disagree with anything in that statement. I know many of you might, but I've seen and heard enough to know that that's pretty accurate. This is my conclusion. Young people, especially millennials, are not stupid. I talk to a lot of older people that always want to blame young people for being lazy. There's a list of woes that older people place on millennials and young people. It's like one big blanket that's supposed to cover every issue. See, it's easy to do that. But the problem is, they don't say that about their grandkids. I've not heard one say that. Their grandkids are smart and they're going to college and they're this and they're that. But everybody else falls under that blanket. This is the contradiction the church is. This is the contradiction humanity is. We want to blame people. This is one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected. He was able to find bad guys, scapegoats to blame everything on, and he was going to fix the world by fixing them, by getting rid of them, by hating them. Now, there's one story I'm going to tell that kind of proves my point here. It's the story of Chip and Joanna Gaines. Now, I never liked them. They're HGTV stars, and they're pretty good at what they do. They remodel things. They're born-again Christians, as far right-wing as you can get. Go to an evangelical church, have a lot of influence, have a lot of money. In fact, if you go and try to buy some of their furniture, you're going to find out you're going to need a loan to do it. This is one of my hang-ups with them. Their furniture was so expensive. I went to Amish country and found they had a pillow for like $120. I mean, a pillow. Didn't look anything more special than any other pillow that I've ever seen, but it was $120. I digress there. I don't want to judge, but I did kind of judge there. It kind of bothered me. That's one of my hang-ups, maybe. But something happened. Now, Chip and Joanna Gaines have quite a few TV shows, and they have a new one. It's called Back to the Frontier. Now, this Back to the Frontier goes back to olden days and see how people live. The series is about exploring different lifestyles and communities, and what they did was they put a gay couple in as part of an inclusion theme. The gay couple was Rob and Brian. Okay, this sparked controversy across the nation. Controversy. All the right-wing Christians attacked them. Chip and Joanna Gaines have to point their sin out. Can't put them on their program. Got to alienate them because they're wrong and we're right, and they didn't do it, so we should boycott them. I'm not sure that's going to work, but this is sort of how it went. Now, there was a very well-known figure that came into the fray, Franklin Graham. He came out and he said this, and he said it on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. He said, "I hope this isn't true, but I read today that Chip and Joanna Gaines are featuring a gay couple in their new series. If it's true, it's very disappointing. While we are to love people, we should love them enough to tell them the truth of God's word. His word is absolute truth. God loves us, and his design for marriage is between one man and one woman. Promoting something that God defines as sin is in itself sin." Chip Gaines has publicly defended the couple's inclusion and pushed back against the criticism, saying that asking questions, listening, and learning were too much to ask of modern American Christian culture. He emphasized the importance of love and kindness. There's a lot I can say about this. Of course, Franklin Graham, I have no respect for at all. This is a guy who's telling Chris and Joanna Gaines who they should have on their program because, you see, Christians should control what you think, what you say, and what you believe. No thinking outside of the box. This is the checklist you must follow. You are the Borg. You shouldn't think out of the box. You shouldn't think like Jesus. You shouldn't use radical love in your life. Just hate. You're out. You're in. Let's do that. Let's chase them away from the church. Or you can come into the church if you're homosexual, sit in the back, and don't participate. Yet they get to choose somebody else's fate because, you see, they're the judge and jury, not God. So listen, people, before you point that finger, remember there are three fingers pointing back at you. Use Jesus, the radical of his day, as your example. Back in Jesus' day, he was the liberal, the radical. And guess who were the right-wing conservatives? Oh, the Pharisees and Sadducees, who used the law against people. Yes, they did, and it's still happening today. That's all I have today. God bless you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our video. Remember, we have a sister channel called Nights Around the Fire. It's about legends, mysteries, and myths. There's three of us involved, me, Ashley Hamilton, and Sue Taylor. You'll love the channel. I have a link in the description box. Go there, and don't forget to love your neighbor as yourself. We'll see you next time right here on The David Thompson Show.